All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. We wanted to thank you for coming, first of all. We're really excited to have you here for our very first webinar, where we're going to be going over the difference between all the project structures that are available between EPMO, PMO, and you'll get to learn about how to make the critical decision of choosing which one of those is going to be best for your organization. It may be the PMO, it may be an EPMO, could be both, or neither one of those. Our presenter, Denilson, has over 17 years of experience in project management, and he brings a really valuable perspective to this topic as he's been a part of numerous EPMO and PMO deployments in the past. So his background actually includes navigating both complex enterprise initiatives that include things like CRM implementations, M&A integrations, and as a Marine Corps logistics officer, he brings a combination of both military experience and corporate experience that he can give us some unique insights on into what an effective project governance looks like. So over the next hour, we're going to move past what the theory actually is and provide you with some practical frameworks that hopefully you will find useful as you're considering how to implement either one of these project governance structures in your organization. We've also built in time for questions, so please use the Q&A feature to submit them as any of those come to your mind where we're going through the presentation, and we'll make sure we do our best to get to them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Denilson, who's seen firsthand how important the decision between choosing between an EPMO and a PMO can be, and is looking forward to sharing the insights with you today.
Welcome everyone. We'll talk about how you as senior leaders and PMs in your organization can identify and select truly impactful projects and further your strategic goals, and also minimize a lot of the project delivery struggles that many companies face. So as you saw in the description of the webinar, when registering, selecting the right project is wasteful without the right delivery. Also, delivering the project right is pointless if you don't select the right project. It's a critical distinction because delivering the wrong project flawlessly is still a failure. In fact, we often tell our clients that we ask them, why are you delivering flawlessly the wrong project? This tension between project selection and project execution is at the heart of PMO versus EPMO, this discussion that we're going to explore today. So let's start off by taking a look at a real world example so we can anchor this message. Let's talk about the Tacoma Public Schools. This is a public school system in Tacoma, Washington, and they had certain challenges that they were facing. So the situation is, just so we can undergird everything about the school, they had a population of 30,000 students. That school, they were facing a graduation crisis where only 55% of their students were graduating. This is back in 2010. So if you just by the numbers, 13,000 of their students were at risk of dropping out. And some of the challenges that they were facing were IT systems that were aging. They didn't have proper summer programs. Their infrastructure was failing and needed to be updated. And also they had really difficult time delivering projects appropriately. And they also faced a limited budget, of course, being a public school system. They couldn't address all of the issues they were facing simultaneously. So some of the key decision factors that they had was, did they need to execute projects better or select more impactful projects? This led to them facing a key decision point of selecting either a PMO or EPMO, which one would actually help them solve their problems. And the ultimate question that they were faced with was about taxpayers. It was the dollar amount. How were they going to be able to efficiently use all of the money from their taxpayers to have a significant impact on that sagging graduation rate? So what we're going to cover today is just going to explore some of what they had to go through, some of the decisions they had to make, and some of the deliberate actions that they took to be able to resolve these problems. Sandra?
Great, thank you, Denilson. So I'm going to go ahead and share the roadmap for today's session. What we're going to be looking at first is exploring really why this decision is even so critical. Why is this so important? And then from there, we're going to clarify what the core differences are between an EPMO and a PMO and figure out what each one does, as well as where their responsibilities lie. Then we're going to examine where the functions overlap, how they can work together effectively, as well as how organizations could potentially implement both of those things. Then we're going to provide you with decision-making frameworks that will help you determine which model is going to be best for your organization, along with implementation guidance that you can use as you're considering how to get started. And then lastly, we're going to revisit the case study that Denilson just talked about with Tacoma Public Schools and see what impact their decision actually had on their outcomes. And we're going to look at some of the bare MCG solutions that will help you make that decision for yourself and your organization. And then finally, we'll make sure that we have time for a live Q&A session where we can address all those questions that you've come up with. So by the end of our time together, you'll have a clear understanding of what a PMO is versus what an EPMO is, and which one would best suit your organization needs.
All right. Thank you, Sandra. So what's the why about this topic that we're having this webinar for? You know, why does this matter? And stealing from Simon Sinek, if you've read his book, start with why. So that's what we'll be starting with today. It's important to fully understand your current situation so that you know exactly where you want to get to. It's not simply, you know, we want to get to we want to get the most out of our project investments, so we need a PMO, or it's not as simple as, you know, we want to make sure our strategies are achieved, and so we need an EPMO. There's a lot more that goes into those decisions that we need to examine, that you need to focus on for your organizations. So those need to be facts-based decisions. And on this slide, it shows 4 key risks that you face when you choose the wrong structure or none at all, if you just get hampered by indecision. The first one, strategic misalignment, that goes to the heart of what an EPMO is, that we'll get to later. Imagine you spend $1.2 million on a system upgrade and you never did a due diligence, never seen if it was going to actually further your organization, only to find out that that system becomes obsolete in 6 months, and they're going to the company you hired to take on that implementation is going to roll on to a new version of it. So that can significantly hamper your ability to accomplish your strategic goals. For execution failures, I'm sure a lot of us have seen execution failures in projects. Imagine a government custom ERP project, one specifically that I actually was on. I was brought in to course correct. That project, it was actually a program, started with a $2 million budget that ballooned to over $6 million and 2 years of delay. So we had to go in there and completely change and course correct that project. Organizational friction, that can happen if you don't have an EPMO that can actually conduct a lot of the deconfliction. Imagine you can expect the different territorial battles between departments, always fighting not only for resources but for leadership's times, for development time, and deployment times, and all of that. A good example of this that I found, it was actually another YouTube video I was watching. The company Barclays, the financial company, they did a project. They had a project approval kickoff process, even though they already had a structured and very well organized process. It took over a year for even basic projects to get kicked off, and then once they were kicked off, the actual acceptance and then the release and then the deployment was done in a weird series of either monthly reviews, quarterly reviews, biannual reviews. And so you can imagine, even though you complete a project, just trying to get on the roster to get a kickoff or to get a deployment, it can be challenging as you're competing with other departments for that type of visibility. Um, so at the end, the dev teams, it was interesting that the development teams themselves were so excited, saying that they were agile. Yay, awesome! We're an agile organization. Meanwhile, yes, you're agile in your in your development. What is it on the approval process for the projects, and then what is it after development for the actual deployment process? So you need to make sure you cover that. And you can imagine the competition to try to make it into those acceptance meetings, or not even, never mind, just the quarterly reviews for your project. Another one, the final one there, competitive disadvantage. This is significant. This talks directly to actual dollars, your revenue that you get in, or the cost savings, your speed to market. If you don't align with goals, or if you deliver poorly, you'll inevitably spend time and resources just on fruitless projects, and you may even struggle in completing projects, which will delay your growth and your success. I was looking for competitive disadvantages because of a lack of organization. I found a really interesting one that was Target. I don't know if any of you remember Target in 2013. They actually tried getting into the Canadian market, and they did it in a very blitzkrieg manner, where they opened 124 stores in 10 months in Canada. And they didn't have any governance, no alignment across the board. And so that meant that dependencies were not captured. They led to empty shelves because of logistics issues, warehousing, and so that caused a host of other problems. This one has significant impact. This one, after 2 years, Target completely closed out of the Canada market, and that affected 17,000 jobs. That's real world negative impact of just not having that cohesion that an EPMO can provide, or that delivery that a PMO can provide. So let's get to the meat of this, which is PMO versus EPMO. Let's talk about the differences and the similarities of them. So starting off with the basics, what is a PMO and EPMO? I'm preaching to the choir. It's a project management office and enterprise project management office, enterprise PMO. You've probably seen them with different names. They do exist by various different names. I actually was thinking of even coining P3MO or EP3MO, because you got program, project, and portfolio. I've seen those three versions in it. I've seen each one. I've seen one. I've seen organizations that had all three. So a project management office, a program management office, portfolio management office. You've probably heard them called solution development offices, project delivery offices. Same thing with an EPMO. I've seen a strategy management office, an EPO, enterprise project office. So it can go by many different names. I've also seen different business levels. You've probably seen this as well. I've seen a PMO in a C-suite. I've also seen an EPMO at a business unit level. Also, different scale and scope. Uh, I've been in the EPMO that was just three individuals, me and two others. I've also seen a PMO with 30 team members. So it can vary on scale and scope. But one thing that I noticed, probably some of you have noticed as well, across industries, across companies, and across all the different versions of these, there are two themes in that I've noticed that is discussed in companies, articles, videos, in PMI also talks about this, which is that a PMO focuses on projects, specifically project delivery, and an EPMO focuses on strategy, specifically strategy realization or strategic goals furthering. So a simple way to remember is that, as I mentioned previously, a PMO does a project right and an EPMO does the right projects. So a PMO is about, let's go into each one individually. PMO is about project delivery, all aspects around that. It's about the governance, which are the rules, standardization, which are the way you actually go about your work, reporting project status, training, even though both have training, specifically PMO training is different. Tools and techniques management, meaning what kind of PPM are we going to be using, or what kind of document repository are we going to be using. And keep in mind that a PMO, uh, that is uh, that is project timeline focused, meaning that the completion of a project is what matters and the successful completion of a project. So for a PMO, success means on time, in scope, and under budget. For an EPMO, it's about furthering strategy, and it focuses on enterprise project selection. So let me take a minute to explain why enterprise, why that. Excuse me. So for enterprise, that's two departments or two or more departments, essentially. If you're a company with 5 individuals, you probably don't need an EPMO. But if you have projects spanning two or more departments, that's what an enterprise project management office focuses on. That's why enterprise is in there. Also, because for enterprise, you're not focusing on single departmental issues. So that I found this interesting one. You have your strategic stapler reallocation project, your cost saving initiative to that involves a full audit of gold-plated staplers. That doesn't need corporate funding. That can be a departmental project that you have. Also, enterprise is focused on strategic goals, and they're multi-departmental by nature. Whenever there are strategic goals in the company, it's across the board. It's for your company. It's not just for that one department. Your department ideally should get their strategies, their strategic goals from the corporate strategic goals. Also, an enterprise is high enough and has seniority enough to deconflict departmental priorities. You'll inevitably see departments competing, as we mentioned, for resources, for leadership time, and enterprise at the enterprise level. That's where deconfliction can happen. Also, major initiatives they cut across silos. Uh, Especially when you talk about, I'm from this world, IT, they tend to focus on everything IT. This we control it all, and this is all ours, and we get the bulk share of everything. Or finance, we control the purse, so we need all the resources. We need to have that seniority and that control. So those silos happen constantly in large corporations, even mid-market corporations that are experiencing growth. Uh, they get those types of silos and single focus. And so at the enterprise level, the enterprise is what cuts across all of those silos. And departments should be able to fund their own projects. So you wouldn't have a enterprise project management office focused on departmental projects when a department has their own funds allocated to them and they can prioritize their projects on their own. And you essentially want that. So an EPMO is about portfolio and program development as well. They are about the funding of projects, and they provide project value realization. So because of this, a EPMO is inherently forward thinking and visionary. Its success is actually measured by the degree the strategy is furthered. This is after project completion. So an EPMO wants to make sure that a strategic goal is achieved or a strategy has been furthered. That's how we measure success. So with that, though, there are these two have very similar job functions, although different. And there are some overlap that may get confused or blurred. Lines may be blurred a little bit. But let me explain. And this is Sandra's diagram. She absolutely loves Venn diagrams, so we had to include one here for her. So yeah, you have all of the functions of a PMO on the left. The EPMO, the main functions on the right, not all the functions, the main functions. And in the middle is where you'll see a lot of that overlap. So I want to go over these and discuss the differences in a PMO and an EPMO for each of them. So governance, PMO, that focuses on the rules that ensure delivery consistency. For a EPMO, the governance of it is that are rules for project selection and prioritization. Though that's the distinction between the two. For risk management, a PMO ensures that risk is minimized at the project level, and an EPMO is managing risk to strategic goals, whatever's causing the risk to the business itself. For resource management, a PMO project team, it focuses on project team resource management and leveling. And an EPMO, although they can do resource management, they can support that, especially across departments and deconfliction of that and prioritization of it. EPMO is actually more focused on resource acquisition. And so that means funding, the people, the hiring, and all of that, the vendors, and EPMO should be focused on that. For reporting structures, PMO, of course, we all reported to a PMO or have seen that happen. It's project success. The amber, the red, amber, green stoplights. How are your project doing? How's your project working right now? How is it achieving? How is it actually being deployed? Are you in scope? Are you on time? For a EPMO, it's about value realization. And so that translates to NPV, ROI. NPV, if you don't know, it's a net present value. It's a really complex calculation talking about your investments now at a future price and just to see if it's worth the investment. So that's what an EPMO focuses on is value realization, while a PMO is project success. And for compliance, we're looking at how a PMO, how the projects follow the standards that have been set. For an EPMO, it's on strategic and regulatory compliance. Regulatory is the important part for over here. And in training, finally, the PMO is focused on the PMs, certification, project teams, methodologies, standards, providing training for all of that. And EPMO needs to be training its leadership, its executive leaders, department heads. And it can also house a center of excellence. Most centers of excellence for project management that I've seen have been housed in an EPMO, although you can have it in the PMO if you don't have an EPMO. So if you have an EPMO, I've generally seen a center of excellence at the PMO level, or I'm sorry, at the EPMO level. And just a note also, Sandra's monitoring the Q&A. So if you have questions while I am going through our presentation, bring up the questions and she can stop me and I'll answer them. So I'm sure that some of you have seen EPMOs manage small and large projects. I know that you've probably seen PMOs actually do the project selection and identify which projects are going to be taken on and at what priority. That happens just as I mentioned before about the naming. You can call them whatever, and you can also you can also structure them in different ways. There's no agency mandating PMO and EPMO structure. I know that PMI just last year launched a a PMO certification itself. So we can be a PMO certified practitioner, almost like the PMP, the project management certified practitioner. They started that for the PMO, but there's actually no guidebook for an EPMO. I've looked everywhere. They do talk about an EPMO and how a PMO can actually do a lot of the selection and the strategy focused functions. But the same rule that applies for project managers applies here. It depends. It depends on your organization. It depends on your team members. It depends on your goals. So just to go over some of these, for a smaller company with lower budget, with not many enterprise projects, an EPMO might not make sense. A PMO can take on project selection duties even if it's housed in IT or finance or another department. So it can scale. You can have PMO with EPMO functions. Also, the reverse happens. You can have an EPMO that is first established to reel in good idea projects. That's one quote term that I like saying that a lot of people, I've seen a lot of companies have, is just, I think it'll be a great idea if we implement Workday across the board. Meanwhile, no actual due diligence has been done if you actually need it. Just because it's a cool technology, just because AI is great doesn't mean we absolutely need that for a company. Is it a good idea for it? Um, is it aligned to your goals? Not is it a good idea? So an EPMO can sometimes it's created first before PMOs, and so it needs to take on some of that more project governance duties, and it needs to do more review on project reporting, standardizations, all of that. And so EPMOs can do a lot of PMO functions as well. Incidentally, the Tacoma Public Schools, oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to that later, but keep that in mind about doing cross functions with one of these agencies or departments, if you will. So with that, here are three basic strategies, as you can read right there. There are three basic strategies for limited role adoption of from one structure to the other structure. So for PMO with EPMO functions, you want to make sure that you add project selection to the charter if you're going to have it take on those functions. You want to be able to allocate resources to portfolio management. Don't cross your resources and have a project manager doing a very complex project. Also try to do some portfolio management. So you need to be sure to allocate your resources appropriately. Also, you got to add strategy alignment to the actual framework. Not only selecting projects just because you want to select them on complexity or availability, or just prioritizing them based off of one metric or another. You want to make sure you actually make your project align to strategy and further your strategy. And for an EPMO that's taken on PMO functions, you want to start with standardizing methodologies. A very important part of a PMO is that the methodologies are standardized. And you want to be able to create templates so that that standardization can happen. So your PMs are providing you with the same or similar reports, and so you're not getting 5 different reports from 5 different project managers taking on 5 different projects. Also, you want to be able to monitor project health. So even though the EPMO is focused on value realization, if you're taking on PMO functions, you need to make sure that the project's delivering on time, within scope, and under budget. Now, let's say that you want to grow from one to the other. So now we know that they can take on the other functions, but your company is expanding and you're growing. And now you need to split the functions of a PMO into an EPMO, or a EPMO, you need to split it to have a PMO. There are certain steps that you need to take for that also. So you need to start by separating duties, roles, and teams. make clear distinctions between them and know that those are the ones that are going to be focusing on PMO tasks. These are the ones that are going to be focusing on EPMO tasks so that there's not that confusion or confliction. Also, you need to start formalizing and the separate structures for procedures, for policies, for RACI charts, because they're very different. You're going to want the procedures for EPMO and the procedures for PMO. They need to be separated. Along with that comes all of the technology that needs to be separated as well for it. You don't want to have cross-pollinated um, documentation repositories, for example. And also you want to identify the milestones for expansion. You know that you're here with a PMO doing EPMO functions. You want to get to having two separate departments, an EPMO and a PMO, and you need to set your milestones in between because just splitting them up can become a lot more confusing and you'll have a much longer ramp up time and adoption time for both. All right, so we've defined and explained the character of a PMO and an EPMO. So you know what they are. Now let's talk about the action steps that you can take. So to start, first question, do you actually need them? And if so, which one? So here is a simplified, very simplified decision workflow that we created to help with just the initial conversation about this. There's a lot more that goes into it. This just helps you at least have some understanding of what needs to go into it and what questions you need to ask. But there are a lot of preliminary questions before you even get to something like a decision workflow like this. Excuse me. So some of those questions are, what is your annual revenue, and do you have a budget for project governance? If you don't, this becomes a moot point. Also, how many employees do you have? Do you really want to implement an EPMO for 5 employees? Um, do you have multiple departments or divisions? And are you in a highly regulated industry that can impact the decision as well? Are you in healthcare or finance, law? Those are some of the really regulated industries. And at the end of the webinar, we will be sharing a more robust list of questions you need to answer when considering one of these frameworks. And you'll also get a copy of this workflow as well. So you don't have to try to memorize these or capture these or screenshot them. We will share that with you. So without too much detail, uh, let's from left to right. What it asks about is, the very first one is your project execution. How is your project execution right now? If you have great project execution, that leads to the further questions about strategic alignment. Are your projects that you currently do the projects that you currently have align with your strategy, or are, as I mentioned before, are they good idea projects? Are they a project using enterprise funds when it's just for the benefit of one department? Those are some of the questions you need to ask. Also, moving on one more level are just general details about business and operations. Are you experiencing rapid growth, or do you have multiple business units? So that actually impacts a lot of your decisions before you end up getting to those dark blue final answers of yes, you should plan for an EPMO, you should plan for a PMO, or both. So now that you've discovered, let's say you went through those decisions and you discovered which one it is that you need, if any at all. Note that I said discovered, I didn't say decided. This must be something dispassionate and facts based. We've already mentioned the cost of indecision. Remember, 17,000 jobs were lost. The wrong decision or no decision can have a significant impact. So this isn't just a I'm going to decide one or the other. It needs to be a discovery and the decision comes from that discovery. So how are these implemented? So this is a significantly simplified example. As you can imagine, these are more complex than just, a 1 hour presentation, but very simple example of implementation. For a PMO, you need to assess the gaps. What are your project delivery metrics? Where do you want to be? Also, you have to develop your governance. That's how you bridge those gaps. You establish the rules. You need to standardize your projects and your project delivery. What's your reporting? What's your risk control? What's your training? You want to scale as complexity occurs. You could try to plan for every situation, but you won't. And as complexity increases, you need to scale appropriately for that and just at least have the infrastructure or the foundation of a PMO to be able to scale as complexity on the project size, on delivery models, on risk, regulatory requirements, things like that expand. On the EPMO side, this is where you need to start by defining your strategic goals. Without goals, an EPMO is pointless. If you have an organization, if you have a company that your goals are very simple of I want to have X million in revenue, or I want to increase by 10x market share, those are fine. You need to have very specific defined goals, both short term, midterm, and long, or not both. Uh, you need short term, midterm, and long term. That's what an EPMO needs to have to be able to start its process of implementation, is knowing that the organization has specific goals. I harp on this a lot. I'm very big on companies having very defined strategic goals, because or else you're just flapping in the wind. You need to actually you have your why. Simon Sinek, my book's in the back. Start with why. You also need to establish that's once you have your goals and you've defined the strategic goals, now you need to start establishing the governance. This is the governance surrounding the project selection. What is the workflow that's going to happen for your project selection and the different metrics for that? And you start creating your oversight, your stage gates, your steering committee, um, all of that to be able to manage the project selection. Now, these are not project review meetings. This is just as an aside, an EPMO should not be doing project review meetings of how good is your project and development right now. I've seen that happen way too many times, and what ends up happening is a C-suite 2 hour long meeting of review of 20 projects at all different levels of deployment, and it's just a waste of time. And what that provides leadership is just a lot of information. And the question that I'd like to ask whenever they say I need to be present in all of these project status meetings is, what are you going to do with the information other than know it? If there's no actual need for you to take steps on that project or the success of that project leading to the success of the value realization, then you don't need to be in there. So keep that in mind for an EPMO, create oversight, but not providing information just to have information, just to know the information. Also, you want to know your goals. What value are you expecting after project completion? So you need to establish that and be able to track it and assess the results. And not shown here is a feedback loop. All of this, what ends up happening, and to the great benefit of the company, is a feedback loop where the EPMO is intended to achieve strategy, but at the same time, it refines strategy, because once you achieve strategy or you further strategy, you start understanding more of where your company needs to go. So it's a feedback loop into strategy so that your company can grow. And that's ultimately the purpose of this, is accomplish strategy, further strategy. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. This covered a lot of very important information condensed significantly. So let's go all the way back to the beginning about what was the outcome for Tacoma Public Schools, right? So what happened to the great benefit of Tacoma? This is an amazing case study. Is their graduation rates rose from 55% to 86% in 2016 to finally in 1991, it was 91.1% graduation rates. Their projects stopped being canceled and their completion, as you can see there, completion of projects jumped from 10% to 90%. Now you got to imagine, you got to keep in mind, these are all tax dollars being spent. So if only 10% of projects are being completed, imagine how many tax dollars are wasted on projects that never saw completion. And in the first 3 years, not shown here, but in the first 3 years, the EPMO they ended up implementing oversaw district-wide summer programs for all students at all levels, from kindergarten up to high school. Everything they completed everything from ID cards at the middle schools to 3D printers and training on those to a whole new payroll system. And they followed a decision path implemented with their strategic goal in mind of helping students graduate, and they achieved their goals as they refined them. Now, I mentioned earlier about cross-pollinating the PMO with EPMO functions and vice versa. That's what happened over here, although on a limited basis, not overly. They implemented the EPMO that was crucial for the project selection and strategy realization, but also they oversaw some of the larger projects like the payroll system or infrastructure builds or new buildings or anything like that. They followed a decision path. They implemented it with a strategic goal in mind, and they achieved their goals as the final results, as you can see. And they continue to refine them. They continue to refine their goals. So this shows not only the success of proper decision planning and process, but also the impact organizational structures such as a PMO and an EPMO can have. So Tacoma's transformation highlights why this decision matters, why we're having this webinar. We've experienced other situations similar to Tacoma. Um, I myself have experienced it. I'm sure some of you probably have as well. But because of that, we've created solutions to help organizations make that decision more easily. So Sandra will be able to go into more into that. But thank you very
Thanks.
much for your time.
Denilson, before you move forward, actually, can you go back to the other slide a second? We did have a question in the chat about what kind of PPM you can use to manage a PMO or EPMO. Can you go into a little bit of detail on that?
That's the wonderful project management answer of it depends, right? You I've seen it done in a lot of different ways, as simple as Microsoft Project Server. I've seen that be used for the project selection, roadmap planning, also for being able to use it in the PMO. I've seen others that are very similar. Smart Sheets is one. I know that some of the individuals we talk to really like Smart Sheets. Adaptive. There's just a wealth of different PPMs out there, which are project portfolio management systems, and you can most of those you can customize to be able to have the type of information needed, the governance, the standardization, the templates for this. Also, you need to make sure you have a good document repository system that can be standardized, but also separate, an EPMO from a PMO, and also even different PMOs within one organization. So you got to be aware of that too. So there's the answer is it depends. It depends on what your goals are and what current technology stack you have. Again, keeping strategy in mind, if you already have a tech stack, you probably don't want to scrub that and get a whole new tech stack just because you're implementing a new PMO. That might not be furthering your goals, and use what you have.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some Bear MCG solutions. Like Denilson said, the Tacoma study actually does a really great job of highlighting the importance of making the decision between a PMO or an EPMO. But how do you actually know what's right for your decision, for your organization? And so in order to help you make that decision, Bear MCG has actually created a few different assessments that will help you as you're trying to evaluate how to get started on either one of those options. So we've developed assessments that will evaluate your project to strategy, and that's making sure that we're aligning projects with business goals. So again, are you doing the right projects? And then we've also got an assessment that will decide where your project governance currently stands. And that's going to help provide insights into the impact of your current processes, your policies, as well as the decision-making structures that you have in place already. And then lastly, we have our change readiness assessment. And that's really going to evaluate where your organization currently stands in terms of readiness for implementing any kind of changes, whether it's something like a PMO, an EPMO, or something completely different. These assessments actually take about 6 to 8 weeks to complete. And the best part about them is that they provide you with really valuable insights and actionable recommendations that you can take pretty much immediately. As we move forward to the next steps, so just keeping in mind, like Denilson keeps saying, you want to make sure that you understand your why. Know your why and what it is that is at the core of why you're trying to make this decision. So are you going to be focusing on doing your projects right? Are you going to be focusing on doing the right projects? Or is this going to be a bridged approach where you're going to be combining both of those options, making sure that you're maximizing your organizational success? So what I'd like to do now is to make sure that we're helping you get started with, successfully, and making sure that your next steps are going to be guided by that purpose, by your why. So I'm going to share some actionable next steps that you can take. And the very first one of that is to make sure that you're assessing where you are today. We purposely shared our assessments because we're firm believers that in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you are right now. And that's why we want to make sure that you have access to that. We have self-assessments that you can complete on our website. These are completely complimentary. It's very easy. If you scan the QR code, just takes a few minutes and you'll get some customized recommendations for you. And then we're also going to be providing you with a toolkit, like Denilson mentioned earlier. That's going to have the framework, the decision-making framework that we alluded to earlier, as well as some questions to help guide you, and a lot of other really good resources to help you get started on your journey. And then once you've done that initial assessment, you can start contemplating your path. So is it going to be the PMO? Is it going to be an EPMO, both, or maybe neither, depending on where you are right now? And then next is going to be building your business case. You want to make sure that you're clearly articulating the value that either of your decisions is going to have to your organization, because that is going to be critical for that next step, which is securing executive sponsorship. This step right here, and I may be biased because change management is my passion and my background, but I feel like without this particular step, you're not going to see success as quickly or as efficiently without securing that executive buy-in. And then you want to make sure that you're implementing with purpose. So whatever it is that you end up choosing, make sure that you're focusing on delivering value that you can measure in the next step, and then communicate that value throughout your organization. Because if your executives, if your sponsors, if your stakeholders do not see the value that you have created through whichever option you've chosen, then this is not likely going to be sustainable long term. So lastly, if you'd like additional guidance as you're contemplating your decision, feel free to schedule a free strategy session with us because we'd love to see you succeed, and we're here to help you along with that. So before we wrap up for questions, I actually want to highlight an upcoming opportunity that we're going to be showcasing. So on April 17th, we're going to be teaming up with our strategic partner, Loctera, for a special webinar on EHR challenges. And so basically, we're going to be exploring some of the common pitfalls that happen through project management, change management oversights, as well as security vulnerabilities. So if you have any colleagues or anyone that works in healthcare or is planning an EHR implementation, this session is going to help provide valuable insights that help avoid costly mistakes. We're going to be highlighting the severe impact of what happens if an EHR implementation goes wrong. So I definitely recommend joining us. Our registration will be available soon, so keep an eye out for that on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that we send a follow-up email to all our current attendees to share that information with you so you can register if you're available to join us. And then as we wrap up, I want to make sure that you have our contact information. So if you have any questions as you're evaluating either EPMO or PMO, you know how to reach out to either one of us. I also recommend following us on LinkedIn. We're both regularly active on there, and we frequently share a lot of insights on project governance, on change management, and just general information that you may find helpful as you're either implementing your new project governance structure or just in general project management or change management questions that you may have. So with that said, I'd like to use our remaining time to address any questions that may come up. And actually, Denilson, while people are thinking of some questions, I did have one. You mentioned earlier on in the presentation that you briefly mentioned canceling a project. So can you actually explain how that would work if a PMO is managing a project?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's usually a lot of fear in companies about actually canceling a project. They don't want to waste the funds they've already provided for a project. A great way to circumvent that is to front load planning significantly. Too many companies want to just say, "Hey, we need to start deployment or we need to deploy it by this date," without front loading all the planning. A great example that I took from a previous company I worked for, Harley Davidson. They had the most robust enterprise project management process I've ever seen. And before they had significant and very deliberate stage gates on in pre-initiation, so even when the business case is being written, on initiation, and then even on planning. At the end of those, they had very significant milestones that needed to be reached and information that needed to be provided to make sure that they were going to fund the rest of the project. So they only funded up to the end of planning, even if the initiating or even the business case was not up to par actually. So they only funded up to the end of planning, and if planning was not done properly, they didn't have the information they needed to ensure success and execution, they would cancel projects there. And I've seen them do it many times. They're not afraid to cancel projects, and that's the problem. Companies would rather spend the money and push it through than cancel a project. So that needs to rest at the EPMO level, since they're the ones that are the purse strings. They're the ones funding something that large. At the PMO level, if a department wants to cancel their own projects, obviously that director or that senior VP or that VP, they have that discretion for it because it's their own internal funds. How much risk are they willing to take? Right? So you need to be able to do that due diligence and assessment, preferably before you even kick off execution.
Got it. Thank you. I'm looking through the chat and the Q&A. I don't see any other questions now. So with that said, I'll give everyone like another few seconds to see if anything does come up. And in the meantime, I want to go ahead and thank you all for attending. It has been a really great experience to have you all on for our very first webinar. I know Denilson and I were excited to share all of this information with you, and we hope that you join us for our upcoming monthly webinars as well as our partnership webinar on April 17th.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. We hope you have a great rest of the day.